Well, you heard, or many of you heard, President Biden's final speech from the Oval Office tonight. Tomorrow night, you will hear his final interview from the Oval Office in a discussion that I will have with President Biden in the Oval Office tomorrow. You'll see it at this hour tomorrow night. I was in the Oval Office tonight in preparation for that, in the back of the room with the press section there while President Biden was delivering that final speech. And what you could not see in that frame, where it's just the one shot of the president, is off to the side where his family was, First Lady, Vice President, Second Gentleman. And, for example, things like when the president was thanking his wife and thanking his vice president, they were sitting beside each other and they were both holding hands in what was, for them, a very emotional moment in a room that was otherwise occupied by 3 cameras and the people running that system to deliver that speech to you, and just a couple of reporters, me taking a couple of notes in this notebook as I was standing there. And there was a point in the speech early where I made a note to myself that this was reminding me of Ike, meaning Dwight Eisenhower, and his military-industrial complex warning. And sure enough, a moment later, that's exactly what President Biden was talking about. When World War II began in Europe in 1939, Dwight Eisenhower was a member of the 19th biggest army in the world. That's right. The United States Army then was smaller than the Army of Portugal. But by the time General Eisenhower was in command of the largest invasion by sea in history on D-Day, just 6 years later, he was leading the most powerful army in the world. And 16 years after that, as President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower was worried about the influence of the American military when combined with the even more powerful influence of the richest men in the country and in the world who supplied arms to the American military and to the world. President Eisenhower described that as the military-industrial complex. He described it that way for the very first time in his farewell address on January 17th, 1961, delivered just as President Biden did tonight from the Oval Office.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
That is the only statement that President Eisenhower made in his 8 years in the presidency that changed the way we thought about what we were looking at and dealing with. The military-industrial complex was the perfect descriptor for a new power that had emerged in America that wasn't about a single individual. It was a complex and a powerful one. In Dwight Eisenhower's 8 years in the presidency, he never said anything as important as that warning about the military-industrial complex. He never said anything that memorable. He never said anything that has lived in history the way that line has lived in history. And he said it in the very last speech that he gave as president. Decades from now, President Biden's warning about the oligarchy taking shape in America and what he called the tech-industrial complex might be the most remembered lines spoken by President Biden.
That's why my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America. And we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. Just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that is exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules. Pay their fair share of taxes. So much is at stake. Right now, the existential threat of climate change has never been clearer. Just look across the country, from California to North Carolina. That's why I signed the most significant climate and clean energy law ever in the history of the world, and the rest of the world is trying to model it now. It's working, creating jobs and industries of the future. Now, we've proven we don't have to choose between protecting the environment and growing the economy. We're doing both. The powerful forces want to wield their unchecked influence to eliminate the steps we've taken to tackle the climate crisis, to serve their own interest for power and profit. We must not be bullied into sacrificing the future of our children and our grandchildren. We must keep pushing forward and push faster. There's no time to waste. It's also clear that American leadership in technology is an unparalleled source of innovation that can transform lives. We see the same dangers of the concentration of technology, power, and wealth. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
I was rushed out of the Oval Office immediately after the speech, along with the other reporters standing in this very small space for reporters to be able to observe it there. And so I did not get to see the emotion that filled the room. I got a hint of it as I was leaving. I could see the president hugging the vice president, the first lady also hugging almost all together there. The emotion of the Biden staff, which was against the wall, the opposite wall of the family, and the family on one wall, all converging on the president, as I say, as I was being rushed out. So that swell of emotion that happened there was something I wasn't able to observe, but knew was coming, because Joe Biden served more years in government before he became president than any other president. And so this was the final speech in the longest career of any politician who has ever made it to the presidency.
My eternal thanks to you, the American people. After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strength of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you for this great honor.